can't find a fighter, but I see it in you, so we gon' walk it out. Move mountains, we gon' walk it out and move mountains. And I'll rise up, I'll rise like the day. I'll rise up, I'll rise unafraid. I'll rise up, and I do it 1,000 times again. And I'll rise up, I like the waves. I'll rise up, in spite of the ache. I'll rise up, and I do it 1,000 times again. The silence isn't quiet, and it feels like it's getting hard to breathe. And I know you feel like dying, but I promise we would take the world to its feet. Move mountains, bring it to its feet. Move mountains. And I'll rise up, I'll rise like the day. I'll rise up, I'll rise unafraid. I'll rise up, and I do it 1,000 times again. And for that we have each other. And we will rise, we will rise, we'll rise. Oh, we'll rise. I'll rise up, rise like the day. I'll rise up. In spite of the ache, I will rise 1,000 times again. And we'll rise up, I like the waves. We'll rise up, in spite of the ache. We'll rise up, and we'll do it 1,000 times again.
My name is John James, and I started the Grief Recovery Institute over 30 years ago as a result of the death of a son in 1977. I, like many other people that I've met over the years, had made the assumption that because loss was such a common occurrence, that there would be people who were trained and to know how to help. And sadly, what I discovered is that most of the help that people offered was intellectual in nature, and my brain wasn't really broken, it was my heart. So over a period of about 8 months, I discovered a process that helped me to feel better.
When John James created the phrase grief recovery back in the late 70s, almost no one had ever heard the words grief and recovery in the same sentence. And people would say to us, is recovery even possible? To this day, some people still contest it. But we discuss it with them, we argue it with them, and we show them from our own personal experience, from our own losses, how we have recovered and regained a sense of well-being in our lives in spite of the losses that have happened.
The concept that we were operating with at the time was, How do you deliver grief recovery assistance to the largest number of people in the shortest period of time? Consequently, the first obvious thing was write a book. The first book was the Grief Recovery Handbook, which is now in its 4th edition, the 20th anniversary edition, that has been translated into multiple languages. Our book, When Children Grieve, also has been translated into multiple languages. And a third book called Moving On deals with the enormous sadness that revolves around divorce and romantic relationships that don't survive even to the point of a marriage. But even with a book, you're only going to reach a certain number of people. And so we then decided that we would create these grief recovery outreach programs, which are moderated recovery groups where people take very specific actions to heal their heart.
The really neat part is we give a practical, applicable set of actions people can take rather than sitting and waiting to feel better, which most people do because that's what they were taught. So the key here is actions to feel better or different than we felt and not be paralyzed into inaction, which keeps us stuck forever.
We began to train people, individuals, who would then return to their local community and moderate these grief recovery outreach programs. We started out with 4, and now I don't know the number. We have thousands of them now.
One of the reasons I'm sitting here talking today is so that we can make ourselves available to people when the need is. Otherwise they go, I needed you 20 years ago when my daughter died, where were you? And we don't want anyone to have to say that ever again.
Every loss is as the result of the end of an emotional relationship, and every relationship is unique. So everyone grieves at 100% whatever the loss is, and one loss has nothing whatsoever to do with the other.
Part of grief recovery is to unlearn some of the stuff we all learned. So, and whether we learned it professionally or at the feet of our parents, doesn't matter. We have to unlearn some myths about grief so we can learn the method that will help us complete unfinished business.
It is up to the griever when they decide that they are willing and able to come in to do the grief recovery method. It is not up to us to tell them when they have to do that. One of the most heartbreaking things is that we hear from grievers is they call and say, well, I was told that I'm not supposed to come into a group or do any work for a year, which is kind of crazy.
It is never too soon to start to heal your heart. I would say that within 15 minutes following a loss of any kind, the griever's mind is already starting to identify the things that they wish they had done differently or better. I cannot imagine, nor have I seen in 34 years, any benefit accrue to anyone as a result of waiting.
We have a different perspective, and the perspective is 2 things. It's an absolute respect of unique individual human relationships and a recognition of a method of recovery that is available to anyone who's willing to do it.
I don't care where they live, I don't care what their economic status is, I don't care what their religious beliefs are. When you experience a loss, your heart hurts, and we would love to help all the people who are having that kind of an experience.
Writing's not that easy, but Grammarly can help. This sentence is grammatically correct.
You can be amazing, you can turn a phrase into a weapon or a drug. You can be the outcast or be the backlash of somebody's lack of love. Or you can start speaking up. Nothing's gonna hurt you the way the words do when they set underneath your skin. Kept on the inside and no sunlight, sometimes a shadow wins. But I wonder what would happen if you say what you wanna say and let the words Everybody's been there, everybody's been stared down by the enemy, fallen for the fear and done some disappearing. Bow down to the mighty. Don't run, just stop holding your tongue. Maybe there's a way out of the cage where you live. Maybe one of these days you can let the light in. Show me how big your brave is. Say what you wanna say and let the words fall out. Honestly, I wanna see you be brave with what you wanna say and let the words fall out. Honestly, I wanna see you be brave. And since your history of silence won't do you any good, did you think it would? Let your words be anything but empty. Why don't you tell them the truth? Say what you wanna say and let the words fall out. Honestly, I wanna see you be brave with what you wanna say and let the words fall out. Honestly, I wanna see you be brave. Just wanna see you be brave. Just wanna see you be brave. But darling, stay with me.
Sorry, that other video did not come up. I don't know why. All right. Oh. Hey, everybody, welcome. We're just gonna try and get our slideshow up really quickly. There we go, perfect. Thanks, Ray. Can you guys hear me? Good? Are we good? Yeah? All right, awesome. Okay, we are at the top of the hour, so we don't want to keep you all too long tonight. It is the final seminar of our three-part series of Breaking the Silence, Shame, and Blame of Suicide. Tonight's call is all about being the lifeline, being that support person, being what we call in grief recovery, the heart with ears. So type in the chat, we just want to know how many of you, type 1 in the chat if you attended or if you're attending for the first time. If you're attending for the first time, let us know, type a 1 in the chat. If you have attended at least one other one, type a 2. And then if you have been with us since the beginning and have seen part 1 and part 2, please type a 3 in the chat. We'd love to know. Awesome. Okay, so we have a lot of 3s. We appreciate all of you guys being on here, whether it's your first time, your second time, or you've been with us all 3 sessions. We appreciate all of you, and we thank you for showing up for yourself. My name is Darlene Garcia. I am an advanced grief recovery specialist, and together with the team of beautiful ladies that will be introducing themselves right behind me, we all came to grief recovery because of a personal experience of loss. And so my loss is losing my husband, Frank, 6 years ago in a motorcycle accident. And I will tell you guys that that darkness I thought would never go away. I never thought that I could see the light again. I truly believe that I would be sad for the rest of my life. And I'm so grateful for the grief recovery method because it showed me a different way. It showed me a way of healing despite my loss, to be able to honor Frank to enjoy the fond memories that we had of being married for over 24 years, almost 25, and be able to give grief a voice and to be here with people like you so that we can share our hearts. And so together we can stop the silence of suicide and the shame and the blame, and really understand what it means to be present, to be fully present for ourselves and for others. So I want to bring up each of the advanced grief recovery specialists that will be presenting tonight. So I'd like to start off with Michelle Sasamoto. Michelle, you can unmute yourself and tell a little bit about you and what brought you to grief recovery.
Sure. Half a day, everyone. My name is Michelle Sasamoto. For those of you who just are tuning in this evening, welcome. And for all the returnees, thank you again for just continuing with this series. You know, the title of this talk tonight is Be a Lifeline. And that was my very reason why I wanted to go to the grief recovery method and learn it, was because I wanted to be a better lifeline. And I worked with a lot of individuals that had thoughts of suicide, that may have attempted suicide and have lived experiences, and also family members who have lost loved ones to suicide. And I didn't realize that I was also a griever and that I actually needed a lifeline, not because I had thoughts of suicide, but because my heart was so broken from the death of my husband 9 years ago. And, you know, culturally, I was brought up to believe, like, when we lose someone, that it's like almost, how would you say it? It's not really right for you to have joy in your life again or to be happy, especially when you lose the person that's so significant to you. And what I've learned with grief recovery is that I could actually, my life could go on, and I could able to restore my quality of life that I lost when I did lose the love of my life. And I could still be able to live life to the fullest, even when pain is present, and be able to help other people through their darkness and their silence. So it is such an honor to be a part of this team and to be here once again, to be addressing all of you. And I appreciate your time and your commitment to be with us this evening.
Thank you, Michelle. We can go ahead and bring up my mom, Bobby Taitano.
Once and half a day, everyone. Thank you for joining us again tonight. For those of you who are just joining us today, thank you for being here. And for those of you who have come back for the third time, wow, thank you so much for being here. Again, my name is Bobby Taitano, and I am an advanced grief recovery specialist. And I actually came to grief recovery to be a lifeline for my daughter, Darlene, who lost her husband back in 2016 on a motorcycle accident. You know, as a mom, you always want to be there for your children and always wanting to do whatever it takes to make them feel better. And so because I couldn't do that at the time, going to the grief recovery method has really helped me in being a lifeline, not just for Darlene, but for everyone that I have come across that have lost a loved one or is going through some kind of grief, because the grief recovery method has really taught us to be a heart with ears and to listen and help, you know, people go through their grief. And it's going through the grief recovery method, I also found out that I was grieving all of my life, you know, from childhood to adulthood to being married. It dug up all of that, and it was pretty tough to go through all of that, going through the grief recovery method. But it has taught me a lot in how to deal with all the different heartbreaks and griefs in my life, and also to help people. So thank you again for being here with us tonight. And I hope that when you hear everything that we have to present tonight, you go home with a lighter heart. And if you need our assistance, we're here for you, all of us.
Thanks, Mom. And then next that I see on my list here is Raylene Alicto. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hafaday, thank you for your introductions. My name is Raylena Lichto, and I'm an advanced grief recovery specialist. I discovered grief recovery maybe about a couple of years ago by attending a grief talk much like this tonight. So I really want to thank all of you, those who have returned and those who are joining us for the first time, and those who have followed us along this journey. I want to thank you for giving yourself the gift to be here tonight and for spending your valuable time with us. Since I became certified as a grief recovery specialist, I have suffered the loss of my unborn child, and grief recovery allowed me to review that relationship and be able to heal from that very significant loss. In addition to that, I also discovered through the grief recovery method that I had been suffering from unresolved grief, from my entire life. And being able to review that and heal from that was probably one of the greatest gifts that I had ever given to myself. Thus allowing me to be here tonight and offer that gift to you. So whoever you are, wherever you come from, I want to thank you for being here, and I hope that you find this information useful and helpful, and please reach out to any one of us whom you feel comfortable with if you want to learn more after tonight's episode. Thank you again.
Thanks, Ray. And last, but certainly not least, our beautiful sister, Kate Baltazar Dodge. Kate, you want to introduce yourself?
Hafaday, buenas everyone, good evening. Thank you so much. We're on the home stretch here on our third seminar. Thanks for sticking by us, for those of you who have been with us, and for those who are maybe just joining for the first or second time, welcome, welcome, welcome. This is a safe space. Feelings are okay. The whole range of emotions are okay. So if you're feeling that tonight at any time of the presentation, please feel free, express, ask questions in the chat. I'm very, very blessed to be a part of this amazing team of ladies here. They inspire me all the time. I wish we had more time to spend with each other so that we can feed off of each other's amazing energy. But I got to grief recovery, much like Raylene. I was invited by Dar to attend a grief talk much like this. But actually, Dar and I had known each other a couple of years prior. And I always like to say that Frank Juarez Garcia, thank you for helping me gain a sister, because it was through Frank's death that our friendship came to life. So I didn't know what I didn't know, as they say. And my primary grief at the time that I worked on when I was getting certified was I suffered the loss of three baby boys who were premature. I was 6 and 7 months along, 6 and 7 months. And, I know if there are any moms in the group right now, you can fully understand, and even dads, you can fully understand the process of creating life, and to have that abruptly end. That was really startling, really devastating, and certainly something that changed my life in so many different ways. And it wasn't until I did the certification for grief recovery that I realized all these things that I hope that you all are going to learn and share and know today. So holders, but we gain a couple more. I'm a cancer survivor, and has also just extremely changed my life in so many different ways. And I think that without having the tools for grief recovery, I might not have handled the process for physical healing without having these tools for emotional healing. So for that, I'm very grateful. Welcome everyone again. I'll be moderating the chat. If you have any questions, please ask them. You can switch the drop-down menu. If you want to just ask them to me, you can ask them to Dar, you can ask them to whoever you're comfortable with. We will compile them at the end of the presentation and address all of the things you want to know. Thank you so much again for being here.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, ladies, for that introduction of yourselves. Guys, this is the Advanced Grief Recovery Team of Guam. We actually have 9 other grief recovery specialists on the island and 5 in Saipan that can deliver the method much the same way as us. The advanced method, we'll talk about towards the end what makes us a little bit different than some of the other specialists. But we always like to start off our talk with our disclaimer, right? Because a lot of people come to us and say, hey, someone's looking for a grief counselor. And although grief counselors do focus on dealing with grief, we are not counselors. We're also not therapists, and we're not licensed clinicians, right? We are advanced certified grief recovery specialists trained and certified by the Grief Recovery Institute. So although the method that we teach may be therapeutic in nature, it is not anything close to what therapists and counselors do. Our method is more action-based, it's education-based, and it is heart-centered. So very different from mental health professionals. The other thing that we like to start off with to ensure that we have a very safe environment as we move through our presentation is we have some commitments that we want to ask everybody, and this is including us. We will also make these same commitments tonight. The first one is to keep an open mind, right? We're going to be talking about many things that you guys may not have heard in this context or it put in this way before. And so we ask that you keep an open mind. Again, we're very heart-centered. And so a lot of the things that we talk about, you may not have ever heard of it put in that way. And the other thing is we don't judge, right? We don't judge ourselves and we don't just judge others. We know that we are our biggest critics for the most part. And so we ask that you give yourself grace tonight after many of the things that you hear, right? And you may think, well, gosh, this is what I have been doing all this time. It's quite all right. Like Kate says, you don't know what you don't know, right? So tonight you're going to know. The next one is no comparing losses, right? We know that grief is individual. It's as unique as our handprint, right? Michelle and I were both widows, right? Kate and Raylene, they both have lost children, right? But at the end of the day, we all have individual relationships with our loved ones that have gone before us. We are also very different individuals, the way we were brought up, our belief system. And so how we grieve is also going to be different from one person to another. So we never want to compare losses. And the last one is no apologizing for human emotions, right? Like Kate says, we're here to feel, to provide a safe space. Right? If you feel the tears coming, let them flow, right? Don't suck them back in. It's one of the things that we teach in grief recovery is that we need to allow our human emotions to process through us, and keeping them stuck inside of us is actually very unhealthy, right? Tears are healthy, right? They release toxins from your body. Okay. Next slide, right? All right, so before we get into the content of tonight, what it means to be a lifeline, we want to just really quickly recap what we talked about in the first 2 sessions, mostly for the people that weren't here with us for the first 2 sessions, right? So for those of you that were, just bear with us here and as we go through this. So really quickly, the first session was all about life after suicide, right? That was our theme. It was all about holding space for our loved ones that have had loved ones that died by suicide. So the first thing we did was we held a tribute for all of those that provided pictures of their loved ones that have died by suicide. We want people to know that they had a name and they had a face, right? And that their memory lives on in the hearts of those that they left behind. The next thing we talked about was grief, our grief definition, number 1. Grief is the normal and natural emotional reaction to loss of any kind, right? Definition in the dictionary. We also talked about the myths of grief. We talked about that in both part 1 and part 2. We talked about emotional isolation. One of the biggest things that we do as grievers is we tend to isolate, but specifically for suicide, there's a lot of reasons why people isolate, right? It's in our title, breaking the silence, breaking the shame and the blame, right? So many stigmas around suicide. So we broke all of that down in part 1 so that people can understand why we isolate, why people isolate in general. We talked about unresolved grief, right? Kate talked about unresolved grief. Raylene talked about unresolved grief that they had in their life. Unresolved grief are the things that keep us stuck in our pain. Remember, grief is normal and natural. And so the unresolved grief is what our grief recovery method helps you to heal from, that transformation, so that you can get back that quality of life, right? We talk about what it means to recover. What it means to recover means to get back your quality of life. A lot of people settle, right? I was supposed to show a video of our CEO, Cole James, talking about what it means to recover. And for some reason, I apologize, it didn't come up. We did show that in part 1. And he talked about getting back the quality of life and how a lot of times when we lose someone very significant or lose something in our life, we then settle, right? What used to be 100% now became 80%, but it became our new 100%. You hear people talk about their new normal, right? Why do you have to have a new normal? You know, why can't we just heal so that we can get back that quality of life that we lost, right? And that's what recovery means. How do you take the actions to heal your heart? We talk about this in every single episode, and we'll talk about that again today at the very end. What are some of the programs that we offer here at Grief Recovery to help you heal from any of the losses that you have in your life? Okay, great. Next one. All right, and then part 2 was all about letting people know that you are not alone. Anyone that may have had suicidal thoughts or are just suffering, right? In this time of COVID-19, so much overwhelm of human emotions happening around the globe today. So then we shared grief definition number 2. Grief is the conflicting feelings caused by the end of or change in a familiar pattern of behavior, right? And we use the analogy of where we're at today in this pandemic, right? I've said it from the beginning when we first had our shutdown in 2020, March of 2020, the world is grieving. Why? Because everything that we knew to be familiar to us became unfamiliar. The end of or change in something, right? That's grief definition number 2. Then we shared that grief is more than just the death of a loved one. So many different losses and so many different changes that people experience throughout life, but never ever look at it as grief. Once you learn that all of these things, all of these loss events, all of these change events that happen in your life bring on feelings of grief, you now can look at ways to heal from that grief. But if you never look at it as grief, if you just look at it as stress, as overwhelm, as burnout, never really do anything with that, right? So we want you to know there's over 40 life events, and I have a feeling that with this pandemic, we probably added a whole list more of losses that have happened that will bring on feelings of grief. Again, the myths of grief, we talked about that in part 1 and in part 2. What do we engage in to avoid grief? We call this in grief recovery STIRBs, short-term energy relieving behaviors. We broke that down in part 2. What are some of the things that we do, right, to avoid grief, to mask, to suppress, to self-medicate? And then eventually those things don't work if we're not healing, right? So when the things that we engage in still don't work to take away our pain, we have what we call explosions, and we have what we call implosions, right? Explosions are like things that we do, hurt people, right? And so we lash out in anger, domestic violence, murder, all of those things that can happen when we don't heal from our grief. And then on the implosion side, right, when the pain is too difficult for us, we end up hurting ourselves, right? People that hurt themselves, or even what we're talking about, right? Our topic of discussion over these last 3 seminars, suicide, right? And the emotional pain by putting physical harm on ourselves, okay? And then we talked about self-compassion, right? Compassion requires action. We talked about what are some of those action steps that you can take to show yourself compassion. And then if that still doesn't help, we talked about, again, the theme of part 2, you're not alone, how to reach out to someone, how to ask someone to be your heart with ears, how to start off a conversation intentional so that you are not going back to isolating because someone just judged you or someone just told you how to feel or criticized how you're feeling, right? So you're not alone. So that was part 1 and part 2. Whew, okay, so that was a lot. So today's theme is all about being a lifeline, but we also want everyone to understand that in order to be helpful and available to others, you must first help yourself, right? As grief recovery specialists, we know that first we're grievers, right? Before we're specialists, we're grievers. We have lived experiences of loss after loss after loss. So we also know that every single one of you that are on this call have also experienced some type of loss or many losses throughout your life, and you will continue, we will all continue to experience loss and change as long as we're living, right? So we're all grievers. And so again, in order to be helpful and available to others, you must first help yourself. So tonight is all about giving you these tools to help you, to help others, but we also want you to reflect on your life. What are some of the things that you may not have healed from, right? Can't pour from an empty cup. So we need you to fill your cup in order for you to help others to fill their cup. We're going to talk about some of the programs that we have, both locally from behavioral health and also the programs that we teach in grief recovery that you as the support role can actually avail of. And Michelle will talk about that towards the end. Yep, and so this is the beginning of what it means to be a lifeline. So we can go to the next one.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dar, for the recap. We're moving into this now. So as Dar had mentioned everything about the definitions of grief and some of the things that maybe you have reflected on over these last 2 seminars, what society has taught us. So when we look at this as grief recovery specialists, when we look at the having sad, painful, and negative feelings and showing them are somehow not appropriate, think about your own lives. Think about some of the times where you were maybe discouraged to show that you were sad. Maybe you were discouraged to cry in front of people. I remember as a little girl growing up, whenever I would cry, my parents would always offer comments to me like, you're okay, it's far from the heart, get up, you're a big girl, you got this, right? And those were wonderful. And the first thing that society teaches us is that having sad, painful, and negative feelings are showing them are not appropriate. So much of what we see or hear is people saying things like, think positive, right? And you heard that before. Have a positive mindset or be grateful. You know, they would talk about, you're going through so many different things, but you should be grateful for the things that you do have. And nothing is wrong with that. But first, in order for us to acknowledge that we should have a positive mindset and that we are grateful, we must first be able to acknowledge our emotional truth before we can get to the positive frame of mind. Point 2, again, because we are led to believe that it's inappropriate to feel or show sad, painful feelings, it is now uncomfortable when someone else displays sad, painful emotions. Prior to grief recovery, when people cried in front of me, it was the most awkward feeling. I didn't know how to respond or react to it, which sometimes I offered them maybe like a pat on the shoulder, or maybe I just offered them tissue, or maybe I said, stop crying, it's okay. And little did I know that what I was really doing was telling them that their feelings were wrong. And I was basically telling them to stop showing the appropriate emotion. In point 3, when we look at this, which leads us to, again, thinking that our feelings are not acceptable. In other words, let's deal with our feelings by changing the subject. How many of us are so quick when things are so uncomfortable to talk about? The reaction is so strong, but then yet maybe we want to talk about something. If I'm trying to tell a friend about something that is painful and sad that happened to me, they might say, hey, you know what, why don't we go shopping? It'll make you feel a lot better. Or why don't we go get some ice cream? Or, hey, let's just go for some drinks and things are going to be better. Okay, and point 4, the last thing that society has taught us is that demonstrating and communicating emotions is not normal. But you know, one of the greatest gifts from humanity is really having the ability to demonstrate and communicate our emotions. Yet society places negative value on these gifts. So that's very conflicting because we know that it's normal and natural, as the definition of grief is, and it's very human to have these emotionally charged moments when we are experiencing a loss of some kind. Looking back at all that society has taught us, it should not come as a surprise, right? Again, that us as human beings, that we are all ill-equipped to deal with sad, painful emotions. Many times, even in our own sadness, we want to push that down, or we want to pretend that it doesn't exist so that other people are not going to be quick to judge us. I'm sorry, Ray, next slide, please. So when we look at emotions versus intellect, you know, the story that I share about my grief journey, it's been several years now that this is happening. And I remember that the time when I was going through the really dark place in my life, when I lost a significant person, what I was feeling was a heartbreak. My heart was broken and I couldn't think straight. It was so broken that it was so difficult for me to get out of bed literally in the mornings, because even if I knew that getting out of bed was the right thing to do, and I had a routine to take care of, and I had a young daughter to take care of at the time, my heart was broken and my head wasn't functioning right. Okay, so let's talk about the emotions versus the intellect. In our grief recovery program, we teach you how to go from your head to your heart, because we know that dealing with anything emotional with an intellectual perspective isn't effective. Okay, so here's a little lesson. The attempt to shift from emotions to intellect, again, to shift from the heart to the head, is dangerous and it's counterproductive in grieving people. Why? Because again, grief by definition, as Dar had shared with you, is the emotional response to a loss, right? So the only thing that's intellectual about grief is what caused the grief and the loss or the grief event itself. But our reactions to this event, they're all emotional. And I'm going to give you an example with COVID taking place right now, right? So, you know, I've had a very close person in my life that tested positive for COVID. And when this individual tested positive, the intellect, again, they had given the individual the test results. I'm sorry, you tested positive. This is what you need to do. You need to go and isolate in a room by yourself with nobody, and you need to stay there. And also make sure that you stay hydrated, you drink a lot of liquids, take vitamin C, whatever the case may be in the intellect part. She was offered all these different things that could help intellectually, but the feelings of fear and the feelings of confusion and the feelings of uncertainty, like, oh my gosh, I feel like if other people that I've heard of on the radio, on social media have died, that fear now has been passed on to me, right? There was never any type of addressing the emotions of feeling responsible, that could they have possibly infected another person with the virus. So now there's so much emotions going on because it's the normal natural reaction to grief, which is a loss, right? When we talk about a positive COVID test result, that's loss of health, loss of safety, loss of security, loss of control, loss of being able to be connected with other people, because now for 10 to 14 days, you have to remain in a place with nobody else. So you're already disconnected to begin with. And that's what we're talking about with emotions versus intellect. Ray, next slide, please. So here are some things to not say when a person is grieving, when you're helping a person that might be going through grief and experiencing one of the losses that we mentioned. Remember, Dara also mentioned that there's a lot of emerging losses right now from this pandemic. You know, we know that losing a job, losing a family member or a loved one to death. We know that maybe even empty nesting, when your children move out of your home, that could be a loss. We know that, what is it called? Maybe even getting married, you could feel a sense of loss, right? Loss of freedom. But now with the pandemic, there is like loss of identity. There's loss of just the freedom to choose. There's divisions. There's loss of feeling safe within your own household with the people that you love, that you're living with, because everyone goes to different places and there's a fear that they might contract the virus somewhere else and come home and pass that on. So what not to say to someone suffering from deep pain, from grief, from stress, from significant changes in their lives, maybe from a traumatic event. First of all, we need to stop telling people, I know how you feel. Because when you think about that, do you truly know how a person feels? You may have had a similar loss experience, right? Like the event might have been similar. You lost a father to death, but the feelings are very unique, and grief is felt at 100% for each griever. We don't know how the person feels, but again, we know that they're suffering from a loss event. And our beliefs, our relationships, and who we are as individuals are all different, okay? The next one is, we need to stop saying to people, just keep busy. This is one of the myths in grief, and all that keeping busy does to us is prolong our grief. And when, again, my husband passed away, and I was able to get to a point where now I can get out of bed and do all the minimal things in life so that I can hopefully restore some structure back into my life. All I did was I went from not doing anything because I was paralyzed and stuck to doing every single thing that I could possibly think of to stay busy so that I could avoid all of those painful and uncomfortable feelings. Time will heal. Some of you, again, may have heard this in the past. This is another myth of grief, right? Time heals all wounds, but time does nothing to our pain. It's the action steps, the correct action steps that we take with time that helps us to heal and recover. And you might have heard this too. It'll be okay, right? It's an intellectual comment. Eventually, it's going to happen. Eventually, we're going to be okay. We're going to push through, and things are going to be, maybe less painful than it was 10 years ago, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a helpful comment. In this moment, the grieving person feels terrible. They feel horrible. They feel devastated. They feel like they're the only ones that ever felt this way before. Instead of saying it'll be okay, just acknowledge their actual feelings in this moment. If somebody is feeling very sad, let them know it's okay for you to honor those feelings and be sad in this moment right now. I'm going to be here and I'm just going to hold space for you. Okay. Another thing to not say, which sometimes, honestly, this could be very, very detrimental to a person's healing and recovery journey, is the myth of be strong. Again, it happened with me. Everyone told me that I had to be strong because I had a daughter that I had to raise. And I was so clueless as to what that meant, because for me, being strong meant just getting out of bed every single day. It meant getting up to brush my teeth. It meant saying hello to my daughter and acknowledging her existence as my heart was broken. So again, being strong will allow a griever to continue to isolate themselves and to not be able to openly and emotionally tell that truth that they are experiencing. And then here's maybe one, because on Guam, there's a lot of people that are spiritually connected. I'm a believer myself. That's, my own self-disclosure. But many times we hear, give it up to God. God will handle it. God is in control. Right? And although that may be the belief for a lot of people, and that may be, something that is actual, we translate the myth of grief to don't feel bad. Again, when we tell people not to feel bad, that's not really helping the person feel better either. It's basically just telling the person that their feelings of pain and sadness, and again, the natural normal reactions to grief is wrong. Okay, so if we are doing this right now, again, there's no fault of any of you that's on the seminar this evening. I had to practice this a lot. Sometimes I find myself still saying these things because, we just gravitate back to what we are so familiar with. But it does take mindfulness and it does take practice to unlearn some of the belief system that we were fed and we were given from a very early age. Next slide, please. So here are some tips on what not to do. Again, we don't want to tell people to avoid their sadness, right? Again, sadness basically just tells them that it really is okay. We're honoring that you're feeling a certain way, right? And what happens is with sadness, if we try to avoid sadness, we're not giving people permission to be able to talk about their losses, and they may turn around again. They may turn around and they may use some of these different things in other ways. And I believe Ray is going to be talking about the STIRs.
Thank you, Michelle. So next we're going to talk about what not to do, right? And it's a lot, and a lot of this information might be new to you. So I just want to remind everyone to be kind to yourselves and don't judge yourself as we move through the do nots, okay? And we're here to support you in every way we can. And please know we're all human, and sometimes, like Michelle said, we resort to the belief system that we knew for many, many years. So, however old you are, think about your age, and that's pretty much the amount of years that you've been conditioned to maybe deal or address grief in not so healthy ways, right? And so unlearning that is going to take practice, and it will take some time. So again, please be kind to yourself as we move along. What not to do, bullet point number 1, sadness avoidance. This is something that is a conditioned belief in a lot of places around the world, not just on Guam, right? And it comes from a very young age when we were younger and we cry, right? I don't know if you guys remember, but I remember my family, my parents telling me like, hey, you better fix your attitude, you better fix your face. If you're crying, do you want me to give you something to cry about? I didn't hit you yet, so you have no business crying, right? And that's an example of the many, many events that take place in our life that result in conditioned belief systems. So avoiding sadness it can in many ways lead to unhealthy behavior, and as discussed, like the myths of grief, right? So sadness avoidance could result in grieving alone and reinforcing that belief. So, when I lost my unborn child late last year, a lot of times, and I sensed it from the people around me, some people were scared or maybe didn't know how to reach out to me, right? Like, how do I apologize to her for the loss of her child? That's a significant loss. I have no business, expressing any feelings of, sharing sadness with her. I don't have any children. Maybe I've never lost a child, so I don't know what she's feeling. Again, kind of comparing, right? And associating that different grief journeys could be the same. So, the idea of I have never lost a child could really prevent someone from practicing compassion and avoiding that sad behavior. It's something that we're used to doing, because expressing sad emotion somehow is associated with being weak or feeling defeated, right? And I always say this all the time, on social media, right? There's a ton of people on there, and a lot of times people are sharing glorious occasions in their lives. They're sharing when they get pregnant, they share when they get married, they share when they buy a house, they share when they get a promotion, they share when their children get awards. We share a lot of glorious occasions in our life, and where that's okay, on social media, which is the platform that a lot of people go to for support, there's no sharing of negative or maybe sad events, right? We don't go on there and say, hey guys, I'm live, I just finalized my divorce and this is what I'm feeling. Nobody does that. We talk about when we buy houses, but we don't talk about when the houses get repossessed or there's a foreclosure, right, on your home. So just think about it. Think about a lot of the times that maybe you have, avoided sad feelings. Maybe you avoided someone who was feeling sad, or maybe you avoided others when you were feeling sad. Again, be kind to yourself, as we have to remember that we're conditioned to believe that grieving alone is the right way to go. And it's the expectation of us when we feel sad feelings. Point number 2, fear of intruding. Again, doing this and being afraid to reach out to someone who is going through something very difficult can also translate to reinforcing the idea that grieving alone is healthy, and that's the right way to go about difficult times. Again, when someone in my life is going through something in present day, my automatic reaction is give them space, give them time. That was a difficult loss. That was an immediate loss, or that was a tragic event. I don't want to intrude. I need to give them space, right? We need to give them space. The thing about it is, because so many people believe that, there may be nobody reaching into that person and saying, hey, how are you doing? Are you okay? Right? We want to encourage all of you to show up for the people that you love and care for. Send them a message, give them a call, stop by their house, visit their office and say, hey, I'm sorry that you lost so-and-so, or I'm sorry that you're going through this. I really just wanted to check on you and see if you're okay, right? I'm a nurturer in my life. In every hat that I wear, I can identify that many people rely on me for support. And there was a day, sometime in the recent events, that I was having a really rough day. I had been, working a lot, and I was pretty consumed by a lot of, the daily demands. And a friend called me. I missed his call, and then I called him back, automatically assuming that he needed something. And when I asked him, how are you doing? Like, what can I do for you? Is everything okay? Are you okay? He says, I'm fine. I'm just calling to check on you. And up until that point, in the weeks prior, I had not reached out to any of my friends. I was just, again, so consumed, so busy with my obligations with work and managing the household, that I didn't reach out. But then I had this friend who called me and asked me, I'm calling to see if you're okay. And you know what? That really opened the door. And again, reminding you that we're all human. Even as a certified grief recovery specialist, again, it's difficult to shift from the unhelpful behavior to the helpful behavior. So that was a really helpful phone call, and he actually really helped me survive that week at work. So again, fear of intruding is not something that is safe to practice. It's not healthy. And it's okay to reach out. It's okay to reach in. Discomfort with loss. Sometimes, as Michelle mentioned, having these conversations is difficult, right? Not knowing how to even start that conversation is something we're all foreign to, for the most part, maybe up until now. But I want to assure you that practicing compassion takes practice, right? So be kind to yourself as you learn how to practice compassion. This is not something that we're all born with, right? It's something that we practice. Discomfort with loss has a lot to do with our losses and self-compassion, right? How do we treat ourselves in a time of loss? And that really speaks to how we treat others when they're going through difficult times. But all of this stems back to the belief system, which most of us share in common, a lot of the same belief systems. The next point on what not to do is believing that grief is the same. In the beginning and throughout this presentation, we have mentioned more than once that grief is normal and natural, number one, and number two, not to compare losses, right? And so, as Darlene mentioned, she and Michelle both lost their husbands. They were both widows. Kate and I both lost children. But because the loss is similar, it does not mean that our grief journeys are the same, okay? Another example could be one family loses a loved one. You have a mom and a dad and a brother and a sister. They share the same loss, but not the same grief journey. And why is that? Why? That makes no sense, right? This is the same person. We love this person. We cared about this person. We spent our time with this person. We have this in common. We know this person. So we all feel the same pain. That's not true. It's not true because each relationship to the person that is not the person that they lost, each relationship is different and unique. Mom had a unique relationship, dad had a unique relationship, brother and sister each had a unique relationship. And for that reason, your grief is unique and your journey will be unique. So believing that grief is the same is a very harmful belief. And we want to urge you to remember that the next time that, maybe that habit comes out. Okay, the temptation to correct someone's feelings. A lot of times, what we practice to know is true and correct only came from well-meaning but ill-informed people around us, right? And we say that with the most love and the most care. But correcting someone's feelings is not helpful. And it's not helpful because that person needs to feel that. They don't need to be fixed, right? When they reach out for help, it's because they want to be heard, okay? And unless, of course, they're explicitly soliciting your advice, feel free to give. But if they're not asking for advice, please refrain from giving advice, okay? That can somehow translate to, again, the desire to fix someone's feelings. Maybe it can also translate to, I don't want to hear what challenges or sadness you're going through. Here's a remedy. Let's work on it together. Let's fix it, right? And I've heard it time and time again about friends having disputes because I gave advice to my friend because they're in a really bad relationship or a harmful relationship, or, they had a fight with their mom or dad. I gave them advice and they don't want to take it. So you know what? I don't want to talk to them anymore. Like, I don't even want them to call me anymore. Another thing we have to remember is the Q-tip, right? And we read about this in Laura Jack's Compassion Code book, is that Q-tip means quit taking it personal, okay? When we quit taking things personal, we free up space to be able to practice compassion. Now, when we take things personal and we want to fix people because we're offended by what they're going through, we don't want them to hurt anymore. We feel like, you know what? You always come to me for everything you're going through. And I'm sorry, I just don't have the capacity to help you anymore because you're not taking my advice. We take it personal, right? Allow yourself to release that belief system so that you can open your heart and be able to practice compassion. Okay. Putting the burden of help on the griever. This is probably the first time you're going to hear this, but an example of putting the burden of help on the griever sounds like this. Call me when you need me. Let me know if there's anything I can do. Reach out if anything, right? What that does is it still, again, puts that barrier that says, you know what, I'm here, but if you need to grieve alone, go ahead and do that. If you feel like it's too much, then let me know, right? It's okay to intrude, so to speak, and say, hey, you know what? I heard you just lost your job, or I know you just lost your mom, or you know what? I know you just went through a really difficult divorce or breakup. I'm coming over tonight. I'm bringing dinner and we're just going to hang out. Okay. That same friend who called me the week that I was really overwhelmed, he came and he brought lunch for me one day. He called me one night and he said, hey, what are you doing tomorrow? And I was like, man, I'm not doing anything. I'm teleworking. I'm going to be working. He goes, perfect. We're going to have lunch. Actually, no, the conversation went, hey, we should have lunch tomorrow. And I said, man, I'm teleworking, because I'm thinking that he wants to like go and dine out or something like that. And I said, man, sorry, I'm teleworking tomorrow. He said, perfect. I'm bringing poached chicken and we're going to eat lunch together. And I thought, okay, sure. And he did just that. And you know what? That was the kindest, most helpful compassionate gesture that I experienced at that point, at that time, during the time that I was, I was going through a lot of change, a lot of shifting in my life, a lot of grief. And it was very helpful. So again, these are the things not to do. Don't be hard on yourself, okay? Please remember that compassion takes practice and it starts with yourself first, okay? Moving along, so how do you show compassion, right? Raylene, you keep talking about compassion. Where do I even start, right? We're not unfamiliar with the word compassion yet. How do we practice it? I guess, first of all, identifying that compassion takes practice is very important, because I feel like a lot of us have good intentions in our heart, but it does take practice to be able to open that up to others, right? So how do you do it? You start first by acknowledging your feelings. Go first, okay? We've mentioned it earlier on, is that you can't pour from an empty cup, right? And similarly, you can't have the capacity for someone else if you don't have that capacity for yourself, okay? So what does self-compassion look like? How does it feel like? Number one, telling the truth about yourself, okay? This is very important, again, because we're surrounded by a society that says, don't share negative feelings. Only post the good things. Only share your successes. And it's so conflicting. It's so conflicting when we know that what's good for us is to express our true emotion, yet surrounding us is contrary. So acknowledge your personal feelings, be honest with yourself, and share that with somebody that you trust, okay? Be helpful and specific. So what does this mean, okay? It's very important to remember that when you start off a conversation with someone, or you go to someone because you need something, or you need help, or you want to talk to somebody, be very intentional about it, okay? Set that tone and say, hey, you know what? I had a really long day at work. Can I just tell you about it? I don't need advice. I really need to share how I'm feeling right now, okay? In doing so, you'll be able to set that tone. And more than likely, whoever you practice that with is going to learn from you. And you know what? They're going to do the same thing when they need that same support. So again, be helpful and be specific and be intentional about your communication, especially when it comes to how you're feeling, okay? We all need to know that grievers want to talk about their loss, okay? When I lost my unborn child back in 2019, I remember going into work after being on medical leave for about a month. And I could tell you, majority of the people that I was surrounded with asked me about everything else beside my loss. Hey, Ray, how are you doing? Man, you look good. You lost a lot of weight. What are you eating for lunch? How is your day going, right? There was an avoidance about my loss. And that hurt. It hurt because I wanted to talk about it. I wanted somebody to ask me about it. I wanted to share what I had went through, because not everything I wanted to share was sad. There was some things about it that I wanted to share, like the support that I got from my family, the work that I did with grief recovery after experiencing that loss. There were things I wanted to share. Maybe in other cases, when you lose someone you love and you lose a loved one, you might want to share fond memory. Maybe that day for you could be their birthday or your anniversary, or something struck a fond memory and you want to share, right? So people want to talk about it, and you'll be surprised, right? When you intentionally set that tone and you ask, hey, Ray, how are you doing? I'm sorry to hear that, you had a miscarriage. I really want to see, how's it going and how are you, right? And how are you doing is a very simple way to start that conversation. A lot of times we say, how's your day, or how's your morning, right? And so we're asking about the day or the morning. We're not necessarily asking that person, how are they doing? So try that the next time you're next to somebody. It doesn't even have to be someone who's experienced a recent impactful or heavy or significant. I'm sorry, there's a word. It doesn't even have to be with someone who's recently experienced a significant loss. Try it the next time you're in an elevator with somebody, or the next time you go to the gas station, or even the next time you sit at the table with your children or your spouse or your mom or your dad. Say, how are you? And you'll be surprised at how that person's going to respond. Actively and empathetically listen and show it. Part of practicing compassion is exactly that, practicing it, right? I don't know about you guys, but I've had conversations, really deep conversations, very meaningful, or rather emotional conversations, and in such ways where I wanted to express my emotion, be it happy, sad, or both, with someone who was on their phone. And it looks a lot like this. Like, they'll be on their phone and they'll be like, yeah, so wait, he said what? She said what? And then it goes, and then they put it down. And then they try to refocus on you, and then the phone rings and it happens all again. Right? Or sometimes we could talk to people and they're looking past us, or maybe even through us, because they're thinking about something else. Maybe they had a rough day too. But again, being present and setting that tone of being intentional about that communication is very important. It really allows you to sit with that person and be with that person and show that compassion, and practice that, right? And open your heart for them. Okay. I think that is it for me. I think Michelle might be taking the next slide.
No, that would be me
then. And Bobby.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you, Ray. Wow, that was really good. Thank you for sharing that. The next slide we have is compassionate communication without words. This is one of actually the greatest tools that you can use when you're being a lifeline for someone who's grieving for whatever reason. And so the first one that we have on the list is offer good eye contact. When you offer good eye contact, you don't have to stare without blinking at someone, but when you do look at someone in the eyes, it lets them know that you do care and that you are paying attention, and that you also aren't afraid to be there with them as they're going through their grief. The next one is have your body language match your words. If you are saying you care, then face them and look at them and show them that you do care. The next one is keep an open posture. If you are sitting or standing, generally keep your arms and legs uncrossed. When your arms or legs are crossed, or you are facing away from the person, it sends a communication that you are closed off. You don't want to do that. And lastly, Ray also mentioned some of this on her show compassion slide, is stay present. This means to focus on the words they are saying. If you look away or zone out, they will likely shut down and feel as if you don't care. This also includes looking at your watch or your phone. And looking at your watch indicates you would rather be someplace else than right there with them. That shows a very negative vibe to the person that you're talking to. And then looking at your phones indicates that what is on your phone is more important and more interesting than what they have to say. It can be very rude. So body language and facial expression speaks volumes over words you speak. Just being present and being there and being a heart with ears is sometimes all anyone needs when they're going through grief. Okay, Ray, next slide.
Okay. Hi again, everyone. So as we are moving through, there's a lot of information that is that we are giving to you this evening. And again, we want to urge you, If it is something that you could take away to be helpful, please do that. Take some notes on your phone, screenshot the slides that you're seeing, and just continue to have an open mind as we move through and get towards the ending of this presentation. So here's another one, right? And this is the big thing. I'm also an applied suicide intervention skills trainer. So for those of you who've ever attended the ASSIST training, it's suicide first aid. And one of the things that a lot of my participants, they say to me is, I don't know what to do if they're crying. Like, I freeze, and it just makes me feel like I need to console them or give them tissue, like I mentioned earlier. Well, here are some of the things that, again, about being mindful as the helper, right? When somebody really wants us to hold space, and really that just means to be present, as mentioned in the previous slides, without criticism, without judgment, and without analyzing the individual that you're listening to, right? And at the same time, very, very important, one of my things that I've always used forever is the Q-tip method, the quit taking it personally, because it's going to be uncomfortable. They may say things that are hurtful based on their feelings and their reactions to what they're going through. And I always want to remind people that when you're listening to someone who is seeking an ear and a heart from you, you have to ask yourself, when it starts to get uncomfortable, when you want to deal with your own reactions to it, and maybe say certain things that we've, cautioned you to say, think about this question: whose needs am I serving? Okay. So you ask that question, and then if the answer is me, it's my needs that I'm serving, then all I'm going to ask you is redirect that to the person that you're helping, because we're going to be serving that person's need at the moment. So the first thing is to resist the urge to fix them. Grievers, they are not broken, so they don't need to be fixed. They just need to be heard. We've learned that through grief recovery. Stand or sit with them. I like to be real comfortable. If they're sitting on the floor, I get on the floor with them. I just try to be at a nice equal level, right? So they don't feel threatened. They don't feel like I'm trying to be a little bit more educated than them or higher than them. So just get to a nice leveled space with them. Your patience and your presence while they feel their emotions, again, lets them know that you care. And you can say anything to them, but if they are sensing that you're not caring, you're not showing empathy, everything that you're going to be saying is going to be meaningless, okay? They want to know that you're not judging them, but you're just holding loving space for them, okay? Be present so they know crying is safe in your presence. And I always, when I'm sitting in front of a person and they're crying, and if their feelings and their emotions move me, then guess what? I end up crying with them, and I don't apologize for it. Okay, so you might want to bring tissue and keep it in your bag as well, just in the event that you need to cry. You can just let them know that it really is okay, right? Don't offer tissue to them, or don't wipe their tears away, or don't pat them and say, it's okay, everything's going to be okay. This indicates, again, and it applies to them, that you're uncomfortable, you don't want to hear about it, and it indicates to them that whatever they're feeling, you want them to stop, and what they're feeling is wrong. You want to then say, it's okay to cry. I'm here. Go ahead. And I always like to say, you can go ahead and ugly cry. I always say, if you can ugly cry or ugly laugh, then why can't you ugly cry? And so when you allow them to know that it's safe for that, they will continue to develop and build that trust within you to be able to share a little bit more of what is going on with them. Okay. Offer a hug. And here's the thing. Some people, they don't like hugs, especially today. Try offering a person a hug and they're going to look at you like, what are you doing? Right. But if you offer them a hug and they don't want a hug, it's totally okay. Again, you have to activate the Q-tip. Quit taking it personally. So don't think that because they don't want to hug you, that something is wrong with you. It's just really because they're not comfortable. So you're not required to say anything. And sometimes it is more powerful if you don't say anything. Silence and a hug can do wonders. When I go to funerals, even if I go to funerals with people who have lost their husbands, and I'm going to go and pay my condolences, just because I lost my husband doesn't mean that I have the correct words to say to them right now, or that the words that I'm going to say to them is going to make them feel any better or any hopeful than what they are already feeling. And sometimes I had to really brave through that line when I go up to the front of the room And I'm like, okay, whose needs am I serving here today, Michelle? It's the people that I'm going to be offering my condolences to. And when I go to the first person, I sometimes just look at them. And, you know, back in the day when we were able to hug, I'll just offer them a hug and I'll stay with them for a few seconds. And then after that, I just, you know, nod my head and I don't say anything, and I walk and I move forward. Right? Because at a later time, you can exchange some of those words. But that energy exchange sometimes could just be a lot of healing energy that is being exchanged. Okay. So I say things like, I can't imagine what you're going through. Okay. You don't want to say, I know what you're feeling, because we don't know what you're feeling. Another thing too is, but thank you for sharing it with me, right? If you think about me, it means a lot that someone is willing to cry in front of you. So be that safe space for them. Again, I'm going to tell you this, you will be okay too. And you're going to, when you start to practice this, like Ray said, it's going to become more normal and natural, right? And all we're going to be doing is we're going to be putting some of the correct action steps. We're going to be consistent about it. The next thing you know, it's going to feel like this is kind of like the normal thing that we should have been doing a long time ago. And at the same time, it could be a powerful healing tool for a lot of people. Okay. So you can start with the people in your home later on after the seminar is over. The next slide, I believe that is that Auntie Bobby?
No, that would be me.
Oh, that would be Ray. Okay.
Yes. It's Raylene again. So the next slide that we'll be going over is support in the workplace. So I just want, to put it out there that I actually work for a human resources department for the organization that I'm employed with. And just from a corporate perspective, right, there's very conflicting beliefs and practices with some of the information that we're sharing tonight. And that's okay, right? We want to remember that this is very new. Although grief recovery has been around for over 40 years, this information is new to a lot of people, including our employers, right? So how do we support people in the workplace? If you are a supervisor, if you're a manager, if you work, period, right? Because you don't need to be of superior status to provide support, right? It's free and it doesn't cost anything, and it doesn't matter your economic status, as it was discussed in the video earlier. Grief recovery and this type of support is best when used by everyone, okay? So as leaders and coworkers, go first with expressing how you feel. I know that there is a belief system that says to separate, right, your work from home. Don't bring your work home with you. Don't bring what you're going through at home to work. But that's so difficult. It's so difficult because we are human, right? We're the same human being that goes to work, and we're that same human being that goes home. And where there's an expectation of professional level of service and communication, it's okay to feel your emotions, and it's okay to share that with someone that you trust, okay? So if you're going through something, if someone around you is going through something, it's okay to ask them how they're doing, right? I do it all the time at work. I do it in the elevator. I do it when I take a break. I do it on my way to my car when I go to lunch. I do it on the way into the building when I come into work. I do it whenever I get the chance. And it's really helped me establish relationships with people that I don't even work directly with. And it's a great feeling. It's a great feeling to know that there's that type of support in the workplace. Providing a safe space for grieving employees. In companies, there's bereavement leave, right? And a lot of times it's a benefit. It's a benefit that's offered by your company to have maybe 3 days of administrative leave for, to bereave the loss of an immediate family member. And that's amazing. But 3 days is not a lot of time, right? And with respect to grief recovery, some people can suffer unresolved grief for years. Again, there's a misbelief that after a year, you should be somehow healed, right, from this significant loss. maybe if you had went through a divorce, it's like, hey, your divorce is final, like you should be good now, right? But creating safe space for grieving employees is important. It's important for them to know that they have that type of emotional support. Okay. Whenever someone in my organization suffers a loss of a immediate family member, this little chat thing that we have, or even when I see them in person, I ask them, how are they doing? I offer my condolences, and I ask them, maybe how their first day back at work when I do a check-in with them. I know that, it's their first time back from bereavement. I'll give them a call or I'll shoot them a message, simply just creating that safe space. Providing additional breaks. If you are, if you're in the corporate setting or even in any other workplace setting, and you have the ability to make those decisions to grant additional breaks, it wouldn't be a harmful thing to do, right? I know that there's labor laws that surround when an employee should take a break and what is sufficient enough to be called a break, right? But if you see that a coworker is, maybe crying because they're going through something, if you're a coworker too, you can say, hey, did you want to take a break? I can cover your area for you until you get back, at least 10 minutes, right? Offering that. If you're a supervisor or a manager, you have that ability to make those decisions. Now you'll have more information to be able to identify those employees that may need that. So go in and say, hey, did you want to take a break? Maybe we can take a break together. Or, I noticed that you're having a hard time. Did you want to talk about it? Do you maybe want to go take a walk together, right? Don't be afraid to intrude. If operationally able, provide more time off. Again, if you're in a position in the workplace where you're able to make those decisions, that would be a good thing too, right? To give that employee time to mourn, time, right? Encourage and promote self-care. Again, this starts with us, right? Drinking water, taking care of yourself, exercising, going first, starting first and expressing yourself and what you're going through, right? Encouraging and promoting self-care. Being cognizant of erratic behavior. This is very important for all of us to be aware of, in that employers don't hire bad people, right? But at some point during this individual's life, they experienced a significant loss. They experienced something that hurt them, something that was saddening, and they're feeling just total despair about it, right? And when your conflicting feelings of grief are not being expressed, as Darlene mentioned, it can implode. It can implode inside of you, hurt you inside. This sometimes looks like it can maybe even affect your health as well. So it can implode. You keep it all to yourself, you bottle it all up, or it can explode, right? And hurt people. It can go on to others. It can look like, someone maybe making a joke at a coworker and then that person just completely lashing out. Or a boss or a supervisor bringing an employee in to discuss some deficiencies in their performance, and then that person slams their hands on the table, or they quit, right, out of nowhere, or workplace violence happens, right? And where there's no excuse for something like that, just being cognizant in that erratic behavior could be an indication that someone is really suffering from tremendous heavy grief. Identifying changes in performance. We've mentioned this earlier, that when your heart is broken, your head doesn't work right. And I remember when I had the miscarriage late last year, I remember driving home from dropping my daughter to school and kind of daydreaming, perhaps even forgetting where to turn or where to go. Yet I've been on this route home every day for how many years? But a clear indication that when your heart is hurting, your head doesn't work right. Am I putting on the wrong pair of shoes? It could look like forgetting to, turn something off or turn something on. And in the workplace, making errors or forgetting a process or not completing something from point A to point C. So again, as we think about the new information that we obtained tonight, think about how it also shows up in the workplace. And now you're equipped to, provide that safe space and be that lifeline for someone else, whether it be at home, at work, or even, a stranger. Thank you. And that's it for me. I think, Auntie Bobby, this is your slide now.
Whew. That was a lot of information we covered tonight. And if there is anything we want you guys to take away from this, is be a heart with ears. And what that means is listen with your heart and not your head. Don't judge, don't criticize, and don't analyze. Just be a heart with ears.
Thank you so much, Auntie Bobby and Raylene, for all that information. And, if you're kind of like realizing and noticing that we are not really specifically talking about like the warning signs of suicide per se, right? Or what do we say or what do we do when a person is thinking about suicide? But what we wanted to do was we wanted to give you some very basic, fundamental things that we know actually occurs in people's lives before even the thought of suicide enters someone's thought process. And loss, again, is going to prompt pain, emotional pain. And when emotional pain is left to be raw and unresolved grief takes on, then suicide may be a thought that some of our loved ones may have, again, to end the pain, to ease the pain, or to just not continue on and burden anybody else with their situation. So thank you so much. At the end, I'm going to show you some trainings that you can avail of where you can have those additional tools specifically for signs and what to do when a person is thinking about it. What I would like to just tie everything in together this evening is really pay homage to our programs, because I think without this program, the Grief Recovery Method, none of us specialists will be here today sharing our hearts with you. And so one of the first ones, again, is the Grief Recovery Method 2-day workshop. It allows you to work with an advanced grief recovery specialist, and Darlene right now is the only person who can offer this on the island, and only a very few highly experienced, like I mentioned, specialists are selected to be specifically trained to offer this 2-day personal workshop. And even though you're working in a group setting, your personal focus will be dealing with your own issues or losses on your specific loss, okay? You will examine what you've been taught about loss to explore your beliefs about grief, and will guide you in completing a set of actions that will enable you to move forward in your life with hope, again, to recover the quality of life that may have been lost. This seminar, the 2-day seminar, Dar just did one last weekend. And she's not going to be doing another face-to-face, but she will be doing an online at her next 2-day session. So if you are interested in this particular program, please reach out to Darlene directly. You can email her. The next program that I want to talk to you about is everyone that is on the Zoom this evening, all of the specialists. We are all what is called the Advanced Certified Grief Recovery Specialist. And what this is, it's one of our most popular programs. And the reason being is because with the pandemic, we're able to offer this online. So it's like having sessions just like this with a specialist. We also can offer the one-on-one face-to-face. It's flexible and it's done between 7 to 9 sessions, okay? So if you are interested in this program, this allows you to have to make your decision on when that time frame is going to be throughout the week, because everyone is so busy, how much time you want to be able to spend with your specialist. And then it also gives you that personalized service. So it's just you and there's no other people in the group with you. The next one is the Helping Children with Loss program. Okay. So one of the beautiful things about the Grief Recovery Institute, I worked with youth for a very long time. But what's very unique about this program is that we actually don't help the youth or the kids directly in dealing with their loss. We help the adults in the children's lives. We help the adults to be able to kind of identify and know when a child is going through some type of loss event and what type of reactions to look out for, and then how to model a safe, permissive space, and also about telling the adult's emotional truth to the child, so the child will now feel more open and trustworthy to be able to express their feelings, right? Because remember, from a young age, they're taught that negative feelings are bad feelings and they shouldn't feel that. So if you're interested in this, the team on Guam is actually looking at our calendar for the next several months. We're going to be putting together flyers and announcing when our program is going to take place. Okay, this one is just a 4-session program. Next slide, please. You know, we also know that grief recovery is not a one-size-fits-all, and it's not a one-size-fits-all either. We know that some individuals may need additional helps and supports, may need different helps and supports. Some people may need clinical support, they may need treatment, they may need counseling, they may need therapists, right? And some people may just need to call a complete stranger that is trained to deal with individuals with suicidal thoughts. So here are some additional resources. Again, when the person you are trying to get a hold of for help at 3 a.m. doesn't answer their phone because maybe they're sleeping, maybe they're not available, these resources that you see on the screen, I want you to go ahead and do a screenshot of this and save this to your phone, because all of these telephone numbers are 24 hours, 7 days a week. So you're guaranteed that somebody is always going to be there for you, okay? The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline that works on Guam and the CNMI. And they will also connect you to some of the Guam resources. Then Guam has a 24-hour crisis hotline that is operated out of the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center. And these are the numbers. And also to follow us, just so that you could stay abreast and just kind of keep updated with the next events that's happening in our programs that we're offering, please follow us on Facebook, okay? And also, Grief Recovery Method, you guys, this is a definite website to explore, because if you are interested in being a grief recovery specialist, just like any one of us tonight, you actually have that opportunity. So read up on it, take a look at what it has to offer. And if this is something that you see yourself doing, we would love to have you on our team someday. Last but not least, this is the local training and resources that are offered out of the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center, which I also work full-time at. And these are all suicide prevention trainings and intervention trainings. So there's the Living Work Starts program. This is just a 90-minute online training that will give you some of the fundamentals and how to deal specifically with individuals with suicidal thoughts and what to do with them, and how to help them. Safe Talk is another one. It basically allows you to identify maybe someone who is having thoughts of suicide and connect them to somebody who is more trained and more skilled in doing interventions with individuals with thoughts of suicide. And the one that I'm a trainer in is the Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training. Just imagine this being a suicide first aid training, where you are given tools and you are given resources and you are increasing your awareness and knowledge to be able, like the lifeguard, right? At the beach, if somebody is drowning, you're going to be able to go in and pull them out of the water and keep them safe until we can get extended and additional helps and supports where we have to refer them. So if any of these trainings are interesting to you, if you just want to take them down because you're part of HR and you work somewhere and you want to recommend this to your employer, again, go ahead and screenshot this, and you can contact the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Prevention and Training Branch at these numbers below. This concludes our seminar presentation. And again, we want to honor everybody and your time. And I know we have a few questions that Katie is going to read up, and we will try to answer them to the best that we can. And if we are not able to, we will help you to get some of those resources before we leave tonight. Katie, go ahead.
Thank you, Sis Michelle. Our first question is, how do you prevent from overly crying because of your own intense emotions?
I'll take that as an assist trainer. Okay. So sometimes we can't control. First of all, tonight we said that there's nothing wrong with crying, that if you feel like crying, it's okay to cry. right? And when you do that in front of another person, when they're sharing their story with you, first of all, suicide is a scary thing to have to, if somebody says, I want to kill myself, that is frightening. What do I do with that? If I'm going through something that is, equally or not equally, but if I'm going through something that is impactful in my life, and maybe I feel like I don't have the emotional capacity, couple of things can happen, right? You could just sit there and cry with a person and say, man, you're a hot mess. I'm a hot mess too, but I'm going to do everything I can to be here and listen to you, to be your heart with ears. And if I feel like if I can't help you because my own emotions and my own challenges are getting in the way, it's okay to say it out loud and let them know that I may not be the right person right now, but let's find somebody else who could come into this that could also help. Okay, because a drowning person cannot help another drowning person. So if you're feeling, you have to know what your capacity is. And if your capacity is not really at the level it needs to be to help somebody else, it's okay for you to get additional helps and supports as well.
Right. From a grief recovery specialist perspective, I think that recognizing that you are continuing to cry all the time could indicate that you have unresolved grief. And in that case, like Michelle says, reaching out for help, right? Knowing that you can't journey this by yourself, that you need someone to help guide you through on how to heal, right? So we said in the beginning that tears are normal, right? It's a way of removing toxins from your body. But if you are consistently crying all the time, then you definitely have pain that you need to deal with, right? Because tears alone are not going to help you heal from that pain. So from a grief recovery perspective, I want to encourage you to reach out for help, whether it's one of us or reaching out to a therapist or a counselor, right? Or psychologist, whatever your comfort level is, or wherever you think that you need, get help. We all could use help and support. We never want anyone to feel like they're alone and they need to do this by themselves.
Yes.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Hi, yes. My situation, this is my first time here. I lost my daughter 5 years ago. She committed suicide. And, it's been 5 years, but, yeah, some of my family, when I talk about it, like what you guys mentioned, it's sometimes they always tells me everything will be okay. And they told me, I'm over dramatic or something. So that hurts me. Sometimes I just don't want to talk about it. But until now, it's been 5 years. About, the situation that happened, it's tragic in my mind. So every time I go to sleep, it's always, I always see it in my mind. It's hard. And then it's been 5 years, but it's been going on. But I see what happened. I see her face, all these things. So that's the only thing. My concern is just that at night, I get so scared. Yeah, to go to sleep. And yeah, I want, even my lights, I want it on. Yeah, I don't like being in the dark place, and being in the dark at night. So yeah, that's just my, how to prevent that, for me not to, to block something in my mind, because it always pops in.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. And I would like to offer my condolences for the loss of your daughter. And if it means anything to you, I would like to just give you a virtual hug right now, holding loving space for you.
Thank you.
And everything that you're feeling, Janet, right now is normal and natural, right? And again, as Darlene had mentioned, it's an indication that maybe you're dealing with some unresolved grief as well. And so I just like Darlene said, this is a wonderful thing. You're here tonight, Janet, because something is right with you, not because something is wrong with you. And this is your first step, right, to doing something for yourself. And so I really do suggest that you get a hold of one of us, or if there's additional information you need from the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center, you can also reach out to me and I can give you some of that information. But it might be a good indication that additional help and supports are needed right now. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here.
Next question is, what could you do to prevent them from falling into a state of depression without using STIRBs?
I can take that. So from a grief recovery perspective, right? A lot of times we do get people who maybe self-diagnose, right? Or we have a tendency to maybe use the wrong words when addressing something like this, right? So I noticed that, that person who asked the question is maybe fearful of that person going into a depression, right? And again, just reminding us all that we're, in a lot of ways, our reaction is the belief system that we're used to, right? And being afraid of someone else's emotion, right? And not knowing maybe how to open that or accept that because it's uncomfortable. Sometimes for us, it could be very uncomfortable, right? And we're in fear of that. Of course, in the grief recovery method and what we practice is to allow others to feel. It's completely normal and natural. And a lot of times because we love, our family members, we love our friends, we don't want to see them hurt. We don't want to see them pained. We don't want to see them enduring rough or difficult times. We want them to be happy. When they're happy, we're happy, right? But again, is a kind reminder that allowing others to feel is a good way to start, right? Because when there's an avoidance for negative or emotional or painful emotion rather, it again reinforces the idea that the griever should grieve alone, right? And when that person continues to grieve alone, there's a lot of emotion that isn't being expressed, it isn't being vocalized, it's not given a voice. And for that reason, we develop what again we refer to as unresolved grief, and a lot of times feelings as such can implode inside of us, right? So we want to encourage you to reach in and set that safe space for that person to share that. And if that person engages in STIRBs, it's okay, because we all engage in STIRBs, right? And sometimes there's humor around the STIRBs that we engage in, like, being a shopaholic or working out a lot or binge eating or Netflix and, just Netflixing all the time. If, however, the STIRBs become harmful, right? And you can identify that. If the STIRBs become harmful, then that's when additional help may be needed. And at that point, you should reach out for that person's well-being and safety. Okay, I hope I answered that question.
Okay, the next question is, when my daughter shares her feelings, I find myself feeling the same way or similar. Is it okay to tell her that I'm feeling the same too?
I think I can take that one. Absolutely. We always say this in grief recovery, that as leaders, we go first to tell our emotional truth. So as a mom, you want to go first, right? And tell your emotional truth. And so you want to make sure that she knows that you also are feeling the loss, right? That whoever it is, right? That you miss them too. Because to hide that from them could also be perceived as you don't care, you didn't love them like the way I did. And so sometimes that can send the wrong signal. But telling our emotional truth is always so important. And it's also something that we tend to not do in our society because it's what we're taught. So be uncomfortable with it. It's okay, right? It's uncomfortable to share it. We always want to be strong for our kids, but there's strength in vulnerability. There's strength in telling our truth versus strength in hiding behind a mask and thinking that we need to hold them up, right? We hold each other up when we're grieving the same person. And we do that by being emotionally honest about how we feel and talking about that loved one, right? Sometimes that can bring smile and laughter to your faces, and then just continue to love and respect each other's grief journey as you navigate through that loss as well.
Thank you, Sister Dara. I have no other questions in the chat. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for that. Please stay tuned. Follow us again on Facebook. We'll be announcing when our next grief talk will be and all the different programs that we had mentioned tonight for follow-up, okay? But you guys have been such a blessing to myself, and I'm certain for all the other grief recovery specialists. On behalf of the Guam and CNMI team, we honor you. We know that this is not going to be the end to all the different things that we have to offer and also the things you have to learn. You know where to find us. If you want to have conversations outside of this, please feel free to send us a message on our Facebook page so we can respond directly to you. Thank you so much for those of you, for you being your first time this evening, for courageously and bravely coming onto this platform and being vulnerable and holding space for yourself. And for all the others that came 2 other times or this is your 3rd time, we are hopeful that the information, you're going to be able to share it with other people. Thank you so much. We love you guys. We'll see you the next time. Have a wonderful and safe evening, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Everyone.
See you all
Take
later.
care.
Good night.
Good night.
Should we just stay on?